Okay, hi all. Evening all on PlayChess and also streaming to YouTube. So I thought this week we'd interrupt the Fischer series to have a look at Nakamura doing fantastically well at the Gibraltar tournament. So I've played once at Gibraltar. It was a very nice experience. Caleta Hotel. And I actually even got to play Nakamura in Blitz, actually, in the bar at the hotel. So a lot of the players do stay at the Caleta Hotel during the event, and it's a fantastic atmosphere there. So Nakamura's had a fantastic string of games. I just couldn't ignore it. He's one of my favourite Grandmasters. So let's try and delve inside to see what's happening in some of these games. In round one, I actually did a game video which is on the channel for it's like Nakamura's most outrageous opening. That was actually round one of the Gibraltar tournament, and we're not going to cover that here. So if you look at YouTube.com kingscrusher, you'll find that one. I can give a link in the description of this video to that. We're going to look at round two, and he was playing with the white pieces against Navalli Harika. By the way, I hope the board is okay on stream before continuing. Just a sanity check there. It should be. On my preview it seems okay. Right, so Nakamura starts with knight f3 in round two, and his opponent played knight f6. So knight f3 is a very chameleon opening. It can transpose into lots of things. With knight f6 he now plays c4, and we have e6. And here, instead of what looks to be kind of standard sort of stuff with d4, I'll collect a live book here. Actually, he played what's the fourth most popular choice, which is actually b3. It's quite an interesting choice. Just fianchetto the bishop, try and get the grip on the dark squares going. Pardon me. Along that diagonal. d5, bishop b2. Black's play is extremely sensible here, just bishop e7, so extremely classical looking so far. e3, and white's establishing more of a grip on these dark squares. Castles, d4. You might think, isn't this a little bit awkward with this bishop b4 check? It's armless bishop b4 check. And black just plays b6, bishop d3, bishop b7, white castles. Now c5. So black's play looks extremely like classical and sensible. Knight bd2, knight c6. Let's get the opening out of the way. It's kind of a little bit on the symmetrical side, except this bishop is here and this bishop is there. If that bishop was there, it would be very symmetrical. If you look at the symmetrical pawn structure here at the moment, rook c1, rook c8, and black's mirroring the moves as well. a3, black didn't play a6, that will carry on mirroring the moves. No, black played rook e8, so we have a difference in the rooks at the moment. So with rook e8, and let's add a bit to here as well. Okay, at the moment, let's just carry on for a moment. Rook e1, and the bishop drops back, so that was the idea, to let the bishop drop back. Now here we do see a change in pawn structure, with white capturing away from the centre, opening up the bishop on that diagonal. We see b takes, so black keeping his structure more intact in the centre. And now c takes d5, e takes d5. And here, a very nice hypermodern plan is started with queen c2. Okay, it's looking at h7, so there's an immediate threat of bishop takes f6 to take on h7. Black parries that with h6, but now queen b1, so trying to put more influence on this diagonal here with queen a1. It's quite a nifty move. Does it actually do a lot though on a1? Let's see, knight d7. For the moment though, instead of queen a1, we see this check thrown in, putting the king on that potentially dangerous diagonal. And now bishop f5, which stops the knight from doing anything for the moment. Pin to the rook. The rook actually moves out of the way. Now queen a1. So there is pressure along here. Queen e7. Now very interesting move, which is actually the engine's top choice in this position. Some of you may have seen this game already. I don't know how many of you have seen this game already, but it's quite an intriguing move. So we reach this position. Now, what would you play here with white? It's a very, very interesting move. If I gave you 20 seconds here, it's a stream video, by the way, in case you're looking at this later. That's why I have to give 20 seconds for these pauses to let everyone catch up to the position. So white's play here, very interesting stuff now happens. The board explodes with tactical ideas after this move. So what would you play in this position? Any thoughts? Okay, I'm going to show you. White actually plays very energetic, not King F1. White plays B4. Okay, so what's the point of this? Well, pressure on C5. Black did take on B4. If he doesn't, it's like white's gaining more control over D4. If white's potentially, or there's other ideas. So black took this. Now takes. Now if queen takes, then we lose that knight. Bishop takes. And if knight takes, let's have a look at knight takes. What's the real consequence here? The problem with this is not going into a pin or taking the a pawn. The problem with this move is that there's a weakness to the last move. It lets the rook in. Here, this is painful to handle this position with this pin. In fact, there doesn't seem to be too much time to do anything against the pin. If bishop c8, then knight e5. And yes, that's a really nasty pin to deal with against the queen. Pin and win is evident there quite strongly. What does black do here? It's very difficult to parry. Knight a6. Actually, strongest might be taking on c8 here. Takes. We're just going to win that. Right, we're going to win a piece, whatever happens. So the rook can't be let in. So that's a key idea. And also b5 is now powerful, undermining black's influence on the dark squares. So a6 was played, not letting the rook in. A lesser evil move. When I say a lesser evil move, if you've got bad choices, you try and play the lesser evil move, you know, the least worst move. So it's bad choices at the moment. White seems to be getting a positional advantage. Knight b3 now. And probably for the same reasons, if knight takes here, again, we just see rook c8. And again, this is strong here with knight e5. Can't allow this. So the knight, though, looks to be, you know, heading for something like c5. But there's also other ideas like e4 as well. Black played knight d e5. That's taken. Black took. Now knight c5. Very nice outpost on that c file. Black indulges in a tactic here, which might not have been best, but it's difficult to see what black is actively doing here. E4. If e4 is played, then it embarrasses the queen a bit. So anyway, black indulges in this tactic, knight f3 check, a shocker. It's taken, otherwise it can lose the exchange. Queen g5 check. And here, instead of moving king, this would be pretty silly to move the king here. If king here, for example, queen takes, and black's actually load better, that's not very nice at all. This position here, this would justify black's concepts. No, Naka just drop the bishop back to g4, making black lose time to actually win the piece back. So h5. But notice without this h pawn, black's king safety along the h file is a little bit less than it was. Knight takes b7, rook takes. Queen takes a6. The rook attack is ignored with hg because G takes is threatening to mate the white king here. If we take this rook, we're just going to get mated in two, like this, for example. So f4, defending the king, queen e7. And you'll notice also this pin here, things like queen h6 potentially that need to be checked out as well. With that pin, it's not doing anything at the moment. So b5, this pawn is more important. White's got a nice grip on these dark squares, and black's attack is nothing here. There's no real king safety issue. The queen needs some help on the light squares. So white has emerged here a pawn up and a dangerous pass pawn, that b pawn. Is this enough to win? Queen d7. So looking at b5, b6 protecting the pawn, bishop b4, the rook just moves. It's fine, it's a fantastic position still. Rook e6, as though there's going to be some mischief here, or taking here. That's the immediate thing to take there. It's a bit too slow, the rook and queen, with this pawn on g4. Bishop d4 protecting that pawn. Rook h6, as though, yes, something naughty is happening here. If black's given time, g3 might be dangerous, you'd think. So white acts quickly now. There's a back row weakness. He seizes that back row weakness. Check. And then doubles with rook c8. So is he going there? Or is he going to g8? Actually, g7 is more important to cooperate with the bishop rather than driving the king here. Rook g8 is the most critical threat along there. Or even rook d8. These are other dangerous ideas. So the king evacuates to g6. And we see rook g8, so coordinating with the bishop here. Rook h7 defending. But now queen c8, and you'll notice this skewer line. Now we've got this winning pass pawn here. If black dared take the queen, this rook looks really silly. Let's have a quick look. This didn't happen, but white would be threatening. Rook c7, and then b7, and then bishop a7. Simple as that. This rook's not helping. It's the most ridiculous rook ever, in fact. Black would be helpless in this ending. It would just be end of game. I mean, something like this is just winning, for example, b7. And then... So black, he's in a lost position here, but he's just been skewered. He moves his queen. He might as well resign with this move. He moves his queen to e7. Naka just takes on g4. And it's a mate in 3 here. It's actually a mate in 3. Black resigned. If he played king h6, the mate in 3, well, I'll let you, can you spot it? Well, there's lots actually. There's two, no, not lots. There's 2 different mates in 3. Here's one, check. And if here, f5, f4, checkmate. The king's just too exposed. It's ridiculous, the final position, really. And there's another mate here, bishop takes, queen takes, check. So it's a mysterious game in some respects, because I think the explosive potential of white's position, how many of us would have played this move b4? It really seems to, and taking away from the centre, you might think that's counterintuitive. And actually, the bishops are quite nice. But yeah, this is a beautiful hyper-modern manoeuvre in this game. But it seems also this rook, when this bishop encouraged the rook away, this infiltration square, c7, that's c7 square. Black's downfall here with this b4, quite amazing. If he hadn't, I mean, what else does black do? If he hadn't taken, white's got a very pleasant position. Anyway, let's not go into that. But you know, black took, and maybe just waiting is the kind of best thing for a moment. But I think white's getting control of the dark squares. Maybe something like this is a dark square attack. You see d4 under white's control. It could have lost in a different way. But it exploded after this c takes, the possibilities. So very critical for black. So let's have a look at another round. So that was round 2. Very interesting game, I thought. So in round 3, Nakamura playing black against Tamir Nabaty, 2579 opponent. 2579. Okay, let's have a look. E4, Naka plays C5. And we have this C3 Sicilian, trying to make the game maybe less tactical. D5, this is the most principled response to the C3 Sicilian. I think it's the most popular in live, but by... No, I'm mistaken. Knight F6 is actually more popular by a bit, but D5 is the second most popular, about the same. E takes, Queen takes, D4, standard stuff. Knight C6, Knight F3. Black plays now E6. We have Bishop E3. Black now takes on D4, and we have this isolated Queen's pawn emerging. Knight F6. So the isolated Queen's pawn is important to study because it can arise from all sorts of different openings. The Gibraltar Congress is still in progress, by the way, if anyone's wondering. So Knight C3, and the Queen actually just drops back all the way to D8. You might think this is a bit odd. Black has sacrificed development and also this bishop, but what Black has gained is a beautiful blockade square on D5. This is a classic recipe against the C3 Sicilian. If Black can pivot around this D5 square and keep his king safe, prospects are usually very good. So Bishop D3, Bishop E7, castles, castles, Rook C1, and now Black does pivot around the B4 square, the D5 square with Knight B4, also looking to get that nice bishop. Usually White wants to preserve that bishop along this danger diagonal, so Bishop B1, but now B6. So you can see that the attention is on that D5 square with all these pieces. Bishop G5, Bishop B7, Knight E5. One advantage of the isolated Queen's pawn is the outpost squares, not here but here in this position. Sometimes Black's king is a bit shaky with things pointing at F7 and H7. For a moment here, the knight's actually quite defensive. It's stopping any queen battery. It's waiting to be kicked maybe. Black just plays Rook C8. We have Rook E1. And then this knight stays actually. We see the F knight being used, interestingly. And now H7 is a targetable soft spot. Queen H5. And this might seem strange, but it's been used with great success, this type of move now, F5. It might seem strange. It's parrying. White was threatening the mate in 1. But this pawn, you might think somewhat weak. It's not really the case, unless it can be proven that E6 is weak. What Black has done, and this is, in a way, it's slightly similar to the strategy of dark square control in the previous game, that here you see the fianchetto bishop cutting across the light squares and Black trying to get a grip on the light squares in this game. But it's similar for square control, just on the light squares. Bishop D2. The knight goes to C6. So what about D4 here? We have knight takes C6. And now Black takes with the rook to protect E6. So what has White achieved with his attack? Not much. Actually, Black has arguably equalised, totally equalised now. Because White has the structural concession still, and without too many upsides to that. There isn't a major raging attack, which you can sometimes get. White just seems to be like structurally worse without too much compensation. And in fact, these light squares point all the way to White's king here. We have A3, knight takes, potentially letting white heal his own pawns, but then a3 is a problem. He can't take like this, because maybe just bishop takes a3. So white takes with bishop. This bishop's just stuck behind its own pawn though. Beautiful blockade. Look at this. Threatening rook takes c3 for mating on g2 now. Kind of similar to the previous game with these nice strong bishops on the diagonals. Queen f3, a major concession, but maybe one of the best moves in the position. If queen h3, black's pieces seem beautiful after bishop d6, contesting the e5 square, no rook e5. Black might continue with rook f6, rook here, and that's pretty nasty, or here. White just has dead bishop here and a kind of block bishop here, and it's black's rooks more aggressive than white's. So white just makes this concession with queen f3. So queen f3, offering the double pawns, but yeah, this is pretty bad with the double pawns. Bishop d3, it's not really what white wants, and also the isolate pawn still. d5, the rook moves out of the way, check. Now the point of this little tactic here, well, rook d7 was played. If bishop takes d5, what is the point of this tactic? Well, maybe white has some compensation here with bishop e5. There's a little bit of compensation. For example, here white's got some dangerous points to make now. So Necker's move here, he plays actually rook d7, pinning that pawn to the bishop. Bishop e5, so it's winning the pawn under more favourable circumstances. Rook takes d5, and white plays rook c7, so things are sharpened up here. Okay, so there's two choices. Well, there's a few. If Necker looks as though he could just take this, maybe, but he plays a stronger move. He doesn't take on d3. If he takes on d3 in this position, then white is actually okay here. What is happening here? If bishop f8, you know, white's okay. He's active enough, it seems. This isn't going to be good for stuff like this. So Necker actually plays a very interesting move now in rook takes e5 instead. So we have rook takes e5 and the idea of bishop d6. So simplifying to this endgame is far less dangerous for black. Now this pawn's under fire, and also this one. What should white take here? Well, white actually played h3. It's all much the same. Black's still going to be better here. It's the structure, I think. Rook h6. It's easy to attack a lot of these pawns. King g2. This one's taken to be material up, but it's opposite coloured bishops. King f8. The king is eager to get involved. Rook h4. The rook is now coming in. a5. White's trying to dissolve the pawns. Okay, can white draw this? That's the question. So Necker's only a pawn up, only. But there's double pawns. f2 could be vulnerable on the dark square. Rook d4, the rook comes in. King comes up. And we have some manoeuvring now, check. Rook b6. King comes up. Stopped. Rook d2, starting to look at f2 here a little bit. Check. That pawn is now fixed as a target on the dark square. That's a concession. Black is better, but what about e6? You've got to be careful about e6. So harassing the bishop. Bishop c1, looking at f4. Some manoeuvring. Nannying f4. more manoeuvring, but black is after king e2. That's black is getting the better of this position slowly but surely, as we're about to see. Bishop b8. Now these pawns are well and truly fixed, not going anywhere. And this might have been a slight concession too far, but it's difficult to see what white's doing here. You know, the rook is stuck protecting the pawn, it seems. So anyway, we see f3, but rook a1 now, with the idea of rook h1. Very critical. King f2, and after check, actually, white resigned. Why did white resign? Well, if he goes to g2, check, rook d1. This is black is making inroads here eventually, and the pawn is bound to drop off. This is bound to drop off though. If bishop d1, rook f1. So yeah, black is in a bad state after this bishop a7 check. If the king moves over here, then we just go for that h3. And there's no time, I think, for white to counterattack on e6 here. If rook c6, check, could be more accurate. Bishop e3. We can actually just take here. I think we can just let this drop, and this position is very good, even if we let e6 drop. Anyway, white didn't want to suffer too long. If he tries protecting h3, check, and the king can start coming in. So anyway, black, you know, he wanted some more sleep. He thought he was going to be ground down here. He is significantly worse after bishop a7 check, and just resigned, even though it's opposite coloured bishops. So that was Nakamura in round 3, grinding down. Nice positional, tactical mix there against the dreaded c3 Sicilian. So he played just very classically, you know, with the d5. I guess it is a lesson in handling the isolated queen's pawn. Black's play just seemed very logical all the way through. The f5 might seem a bit odd, but it's part of getting a nice light square grip. You can see that black was never in any real danger in this game. A nice tactical idea here, instead of letting white maybe with some counterplay, was this rook d7. There was very little counterplay now in this continuation, where the rook's invited in for this rook takes e5. Very clever. If this had been played, then black would still be doing very nicely here in this ending. So this is really simplified, and yeah, we lead to that grinding endgame. Okay, so let's go on to another round. So round 4. Nakamura is right against Nils Grandelius, and this is really intriguing. It's like there's no the armies do not contact each other in this game for quite some time. So in round 4, we see Nakamura playing the English opening, very positional opening, and here he doesn't play d3 or e3. E3 I think allows d5. This is kind of well known trick where black has kind of equalized. You want to kind of avoid this trick. So usually, I mean, in live book, knight f3 or a3. These are popular moves. Knight d5. Okay, here a3 was played. a6, e3, blunting the bishop. Sometimes in this structure you want to just make sure this bishop hasn't got any scope. Bishop a7, knight ge7. So you see it's a very, very quiet opening, no contact, no pawn exchanges for quite some time. Knight e7, which means sometimes this knight's going to come back, and this is likely to happen at some point. c6, h3, making way for king h2 if needed. So no contact at all, looking at h3, no pawn exchanges, move 13, queen d2, d5, still nothing, no pawn exchange at all so far. Who do you think's better here? Very positional, isn't it? Who would have thought Nakamura would be playing this stuff? He's got his hyper modern bishops. Knight a4. So, what is white actually? Is white actually threatening anything? Maybe f4 to put some pressure on the dark squares. Maybe. Queen e7. White's in no rush though for f4. He actually just plays rook a e1, x-raying the queen. Maybe f4 is a bit more effective with that rook there. Black now commits now to e4. e4. Wow. I mean, he didn't need to necessarily play e4, and yeah, can it be proven to be bad for black, this e4? In some respects, it seems to have major upsides. This bishop's going to be looking at the king down that diagonal. There's tactical ideas after that, like knight h4. It looks, you know, is the king really that safe there? Isn't this worth a shot, e4? Naka voluntarily gives up his dark square bishop now. He wants to try and weaken that pawn. And he fixes that pawn, even though this bishop could be really dangerous potentially. Now he comes to attack that pawn. If he had played bishop takes, this is not a good idea, bishop takes h3. Yeah, we can either take on e4 or even check. So just hits the pawn. So the pawn's quite vulnerable, it's protected. Now the best way to this is not advisable, because this is really asking for trouble. No, you don't want to do this necessarily, even if it does seem to not have an immediate refutation. No, much safer is knight d4. It's putting pressure on that e4 pawn indirectly. He's going to knock out the defender. Bishop b8. More pressure on e4, so everything's piling up on e4 here. Knight h4. And there would seem to be a tactical downside with taking on e4, that f3 might be vulnerable, but it's factored in. Bishop takes e4, winning a pawn. And okay, how does black take here? If black plays rook, well, let's first examine the obvious. If bishop takes, then knight takes. This is no good, it seems, for black. Even if we've got a pin here. Knight d2, the knight's protecting the queen. It's not really a big deal. Still be material up. And the knight is, both knights protecting f3 against this. So there's nothing there, it seems. So black actually played an exchange sack here. Rook takes e4. Interesting. Knight takes for queen g6 here. So double the pressure on e4. And also there's pressure on g3. You don't really want to play f3. That would be bad. Bishop takes g3. Ouch. That would be nasty. Nope. Knight takes f5. Check. Give. You know, it doesn't matter to give back the exchange. White will still have an advantage. Queen takes f5. So we're back. Both sides have just sacked the exchange in the meantime, but white is still a solid pawn up out of all that. This isn't great that black has just gone a pawn down basically with his e4 move after such a start where both players weren't doing anything. No pawn exchanges. Black is just a pawn down now. We see rook d1. Okay. Rook d1. Now you might think, hold on, this pin, if rook e8, it doesn't matter, the back row is weak here, we can just play queen c4, something like that, to unpin, because the back row is weak. We're always playing rook d8 after. So black didn't even bother with that. Black played h5, sorting out his back row. Queen c4 now, so looking at f7, queen e5. h4 fixing down this pawn, and giving the knight g5, looking at f7 again. It all seems to work very well for white, this position. Queen e7, knight g5. And now there looks to be, this rook could come in, maybe like this. Rook e8, and it does, rook d4. So either to play something like this, or even like this, queen d3 and rook d7. Queen d3 actually looks at h7 as well. And in fact, black kind of parried that in advance, plays g6. Which isn't too hot, but it's not a very hot position to play this. It's very difficult for black to play this position. What does he do here? If he plays king h8, he drops f7. If he plays this, then still queen d3 and rook d7. This starts to get pretty nasty. He's just losing another pawn over there for not much, and probably another pawn over here. Or just keep an eye on f7. It's a miserable position. So yeah, it seems as though black's counterplay is running out here. So anyway, g6, queen d3. So the rook can come like this to attack f7. Queen drops back, rook d7, rook e7. And Naka just played f4 now. And potentially, yeah, f5 is useful. It's blunting this bishop. So you could just leave the pawn there and just carry on the torture rook d8. But black actually had enough in this position. He trusted that he hasn't really got too much of a chance here and resigns. Black actually resigned here. As an example, continuation. Okay, let's say bishop c7. We might venture f5 actually. That's really dangerous. Here takes. It starts to look horrible. This sort of thing is pretty horrible for black. Yeah, so anyway, after f4, black resigned there. So that was a very interesting, positional struggle to start off with. Who would have thought? No pawn exchange for like 13 moves. And then when black finally did commit a pawn to e4, that was the one that was targeted. White's play revolves around e4 for a while. Black sacks the exchange. White sacks the exchange back here with this knight takes f5. By the way, if queen takes here, then f4 would be good. There's a back row issue there. White's just winning that. So it's White sacked the exchange back and just was a pawn up. But it seems also, the problems are terrible here for black with f7. Okay, so yeah, it was a very controlled game without giving much counterplay to black. Okay, let's have a look at another game. Just briefly, in round 5, Nakamura was playing black against Bhaskaran Atibin. Let's have a look at this. d4, d5, and this is a really weird game for Queen's Gambit Accepted fans. Nakamura plays the Queen's Gambit Accepted, which is supposed to be not a real gambit. White should be able to get the pawn back. The most usual move is actually knight f3. e4 was played. And now we have a move which is kind of not that popular. Not usually that played. Usually e5 is the most popular response here. Black's trying to get a dark square play and fast development and piece pressure with e5 usually. That's the classical move here. This seems like a kind of reckless beginner move, b5. And you would normally think that black is being overly materialistic and should be punished for this. So white plays the usual treatment, a4, seems logical. Now knight c3, putting on more pressure on b5. We have to move a6. And it looks as though white should be getting the pawn back with advantage in theory. A takes, c takes, not to lose the rook. Now knight takes, using the pin. And isn't c4 dropping next? Isn't this a really bad position? It's a really interesting opening choice. It has been played before. There's 12 games in live book. It's very interesting. It seems as though engines might be underestimating the compensation black has here for sacking the exchange this early with a takes. Yes, an exchange sack. Rook takes, bishop b7. Black is also now looking at this pawn. Rook a1. And it's just a very, very interesting position here. You might be tempted to just take this pawn immediately. This wasn't played. e6 was played, which might be stronger. On taking, I'm not entirely sure I'm going to get a conclusion on this. If the bishop went back here, surely we're just blasting to bits this pawn chain. So this looks a bit safer here. But what is the compensation for black? He has got pressure on the centre. But it's an exchange sack. It's a very, very interesting opening exchange sacrifice. I think it's been mentioned white's best might be f3 here. White played in this game knight e2. If you play f3, there's some interesting stuff going on here, which in live book apparently knight f6. Anyway, it's interesting. But anyway, we see knight e2. Giving black the chance to take on e4, but giving white time now to undermine this pawn chain. However, this position is not that easy. Knight c6, and black is actually threatening knight b4 here for knight c2 check. So actually, this is quite dangerous. We see actually knight c3. If now knight well, we're hitting the bishop, so yeah, there's no knight b4. So bishop b4 pinning the knight, and this is quite outrageous. Black now takes on c3 and plays b4. So these pawns are still surviving, and white could be, you know, very significantly worse now if he's not careful. If he plays something like bishop b2, then c3. This is ridiculous. Black will be just crushing white. Or even here, it's not too hot after c3. Black's got great compensation here. These pawns are fantastic. So here, black, yeah, seems to be having a great time after this strange opening. By the way, I hope the chat's still working there. White played d5. Okay, hitting the knight and also looking at bishop takes g7. So this actually, black just played, I think, what might be the absolute best move here in the circumstance. Just simply take the bishop, d takes, take the queens off, king takes. And now he's still got these like dangerous pawns here, and he's threatening b2. But white has now this pawn, which needs to be parried, king d7. The bishop is covering a8, so we have here rook a3, b2, and white queens to get a tempo taking this with check. Rook takes c3. Now we see bishop d3 to stop this pawn. How else to stop the pawn here? It's guided by the bishop. Yeah, so bishop d3 is probably the best move here. But now b1 queening, and we have bishop and knight against the rook situation. So in theory, black's like material up, with a pawn up, but he's also got bishop and knight against the rook. But these pieces are not developed at the moment. Rook b3, bishop e4. Okay, stopping use of b7, hitting g2. But white ignores g2. White pins here because this looks awkward. Now this move g5, which implies actually that black could do something like this if he wanted to be able to move the knight. It's ridiculous, but yeah. If he goes too far in this position, if black plays bishop takes g2, then this is asking for trouble. Say g6. This pin is a bit nasty. We can see that the pin is not brilliant, and yeah, white's getting material back in fact. So got to be careful here. So g5, king e2. Black just plays king e7. Now if we see this attempt here, hang on, let's have a look at this attempt here. White played h4. If he plays rook c1, yeah, king f6 here, we've got king g7 just in time. And then what we can do, and I actually analysed this with a computer the other day, actually, a few days back. What black does in this position is play something like e5, the bishop goes there, this, and then we're protecting g8, then we can move this, then we can move this. It's quite funny, but black can actually wriggle out like this in this position, just in case you wanted to know. So it seems as though the pin is not crushing here, if black can untangle that. So anyway, white plays h4. Black takes that, rook takes, bishop goes to c6. Tactically, this is working for black. If rook here, then black actually can unpin in style with knight f6, hitting the rook, both rooks. This will be okay, it seems. So yeah, that's not working too well. Also, there's even bishop e8 now as well. So with knight f6 to follow. So rook g4 is not doing anything. We see rooks. Whoa. We see rook c4 here. Bishop e8. Check. King d6. And the knight's going to come here, and both these guys are going to protect e8. Rook a7. Now there's choices. Actually, the knight can just go to e7 as well. e7. Threatening knight c6. Forking both rooks. Check. And tactically this works. This bishop, look at the same colour. King e5. This is not hanging, because this is hanging here. If rook takes, we've got bishop b5 check, winning d8. So we see actually in this position a defense to bishop b5 with rook b7, because it'll be check. If bishop b5 check, we have rook takes b5 check. So we've still got this pin. White's still got that pin for the moment. King f6, rook db8. If, let's see, in this position, if here, then check, and we can take this one. Okay, so rook db8, and we have knight g6, rook b6, and now h5. Okay, f3, bishop a4, offering the exchange of rooks. So yeah, black has carried this opening advantage he got from the exchange sack into this position. He's technically material up. Can the bishop and knight coordinate against the rook? Now e5, this is there's a 2-to-1 pawn majority here to create a passed pawn, and we start to see that emerge over the next few moves. Black first of all fixes also down the g2 pawn, but now okay, there's this plan of getting this passed pawn in the center eventually. Knight f4, tying white down to g2, knight h5, bishop d6, and now it's getting ready for this f5 and e4 business. Plays f5 here, and actually white resigned at this moment. The win's probably some time to go actually, but white resigned here, felt it was hopeless. Let's examine rook d1 as an example. So say rook d1, e4, and the horrible things like check threatened. What does white do here? Say here, check. King could come in. This is probably an easy way. King comes in. This pawn's pretty decisive. Anyway, white didn't want to see any of this. If king here, something like this, takes. Actually, there's even a win here with king f4 in this position. This h pawn is really good. You know, this would be winning h pawn. Anyway, so white didn't want to play on here after f5. Saw that e4, and this pawn chain is going to be a meltdown. There's also knight d3 on the cards. Yeah, so he gave up here. I thought at the time it was premature to give up here, but he did give up in this position after f5. So that was a really crazy queen's gambit accepted. That's something really to try out. I want to try this out once in Blitz, once or twice. It's a bit outrageous, the exchange sack, but it seems to be very interesting. So apparently, yeah, apparently f3 might be a move. But yeah, you know, even if f3 had been played, we get some compensation. I think it's an interesting opening for black then to have a look at. Yeah, but the way it was played, it seems as though black was more than okay in this. He had to deal with that pin though on his g8 knight. He did so quite amazingly. Okay, so yeah, let's have a look at another game. Oh, against Topalov in round 6. Yeah, so the 2800, the top seed in the event. Topalov 2800. Nakamura was white against Topalov. Let's have a look at that briefly. So e4. Naka playing white. Topalov plays a Sicilian defense. Knight f3, d6. We have this bishop b5. This is the second most popular move actually now. Bishop b5 check. And yeah, I thought this is quite amazing when I saw this move. I thought I haven't tried this move before. a4, just clamping down maybe black's queenside intentions later. It's quite a rare move actually to play here already. It's like the 5th down, 43 games live, but usually players with white play d4 here. That's the most common, or castle, or c3. But a4, wow, a4, knight c3. We have a situation which didn't seem that dangerous for black. It seems black's Sicilian defense was looking okay at this moment. Bishop g5, so the bishop can come round here to look at the queen. Knight d2. The knight can also look at d6 and b6 here after knight c4. Bishop comes. Whoop, pardon me. Bishop comes round. Knight e5 stopping knight c4. So yeah, white was threatening here knight c4 to look at d6. So knight e5, and the knight does something. It changes direction. Knight f1, rook d8, bishop g3. black castles. Knight e3. So white has a pleasant enough position here. Doesn't have to commit to anything too quick like f4 or anything. King h1, getting the king out of any potential dangers. f3. So he has this nice grip on d5 in this position, and also this pin, of course. This d5 is impossible here at the moment. But what black demonstrates is a little bit of dark square control, kicking that bishop. Knight f4, the bishop drops back. So the bishops look defensively placed but solid there. Knight fg6, queen drops back. Bishop g5, it seems as though this pin could be useful. White unpins, knight f4. So this position is should be equal in theory. White doesn't seem to be doing that much in theory. Bishop g3, knight h5, the bishop drops back. Queen e7. But now there's a great plan actually, and this makes the game slightly instructive, because it looks as though this is like a defensive posture, and black's like got f4 and nice dark square play. But this is a great move here actually. Can you spot white actually starts to generate some piece pressure? What would you play here as white if I gave you 20 seconds to think about this? So white to play here. Any ideas? Nakamura is white against Topalov. So Topalov is actually higher rated at the time of the game, 2800. Nakamura's rating on the live ratings is going to be about 2800 at the moment. But yeah, white to play in this position. What would you play here with white? Any ideas? Red time g3. Sorry, is that in this position? No, not g3. He doesn't want to weaken his f3. You know, you can't play g3 by the way, because then knight takes f3. Ouch. No, you don't want to play on the king side there like that. Okay, yeah, rook a3, and actually, you know, white is threatening some queenside pressure. The bishops actually look poised, looking at a6 and b6 potentially as well. Knight f4, rook b3. So black's defending b6. Knight e2. So threatening now knight d4. To win b6. If this rook moves, then we play rook takes b6. So knight takes e2, bishop takes e2, and with this move, we've now got this battery on a6 possible. So not just b6, but a6. So rook dc8, looking at c2, c3. But this is a threat now. Queen f1, knight d7. Now, knight d7 carries away with knight c5. Nakamura actually, he didn't play queen f1 here, although it might seem almost playable. He actually played knight c2. And it's interesting, okay, knight c2. If knight c5, I think the rook actually just can go back here. But maybe Topalov got impatient. Some kibitzers describe this as impatience. For some reason, he didn't play knight c5. I mean, it does seem logical. If white's going to take here, I think black's going to be fine. Taking here, it should be fine for black. even though he's closed up his rooks. That should be fun for black. Yeah, it's strange. He didn't play knight c5. He didn't play maybe rook a8 ahead of queen f1. He actually just played d5. d5. Maybe it's a bit overly aggressive. Okay, so what's the idea? Well, okay, so if e takes, let's say rook takes, rook here, ouch. That'd be horrible. Not too clever. So Naka's careful after d5. He actually plays knight b4. Black moves the rook, and now plays e takes d5. You'll note also, hang on, there's an exchange sack here implied. This doesn't, I don't think this helps white. If bishop takes, knight takes, rook moves, d takes, and that would be a typical Topalov exchange sack. You know, this position here is not too clever to have with white. The pieces are kind of in disarray, they're not that coordinated, and black's got some threats on the horizon like bishop h4, and this is very unpleasant, so that's to be avoided. No, you can't give Topalov that position by playing bishop takes c5. Naka plays e takes d5, trying to keep black's pieces restricted. Now here, if e takes, then again, forget taking the rook. It's too much counterplay. Bishop takes a6 might be a good move in this position, but just bishop takes a6, and the bishop's also locked in by its own pawn. Again, if we try and take the exchange here, it was very similar to before. Horrible positions emerge. So okay, we see after e takes, rook goes to protect a6, and now a nice move, knight c6. White is ending up with pressure on the queen side with this. He's forced the queen and the rook. It's a nice positional forcing move. Bishop takes c6, d takes, rook takes, and we have rook b4, simply protecting the pawn, and white still got his threat of queen f1. I know this is seems a bit petty in some way to play moves like this to target the queenside pawns, but yeah, where is black's counterplay? Queen f1 is a bit of a nifty move. Try and tie black down to these two pawns. We see bishop f6, queen f1. If black tries to defend, well, with say the knight, the b6 will drop off. We just take care. So yeah, Topalov at 2800 is losing his a pawn, and you might not think this is a big deal at all. Why would you want to play like this to try and win an a pawn? The really exciting thing about winning an a pawn, not usually noted, is, well, you usually get this really dangerous a pawn if you play your cards right. So let's see, is that going to happen? So rook d6, like a pair of rooks come off, and we take that a pawn, and with the a pawn we've also got the b5 square now. So knight c5, and that's immediately used to protect a4. So a solid pawn up. It's not immediately losing a pawn or anything in return, but black's queen is quite active here and goes into d2. Sometimes these queens can wreak havoc. Is black actually threatening anything now? Maybe, you know, the rook can come back in the game via the d file and start threatening things. And we see bishop g1. The rook does come to try and at least establish control of the d file. Now an interesting move. Bishop c6, so double attack on a8 and b6 it seems. Rook c8. And now another pawn is taken, and this undermines c5 now. White's threatening bishop takes c5. We see bishop d8. Has White just blundered a piece? If he moves the rook, then just rook takes c6, it would seem. Even that's not entirely clear though. Now even better, much stronger, is rook d5, just targeting c5. Rook takes c6, bishop takes. Still material up. And it's not even opposite coloured bishops. 2 pawns up. And he's got the a pawn. And he pushes that now. Bishop c7, a5. Queen c2. It seems the queen's trying to be a nuisance. Maybe a move like that. Now we see here f4. f4. f6. h3. So black's kind of tied up. His pieces are tied up. King h7. Now f5. And actually there's a focal point of f5 here. If black, well, black did take on f5. If he tried to ignore that, if he played e5, this is okay for white. White can play something like this. It's solid. Bishop g1. And there's not too many tactical problems here. But black actually played more ambitiously with e takes. Bishop g1. So we're threatening now. Queen takes f5 to get the queens off. Black parried this with bishop e5. And it seems as though, you know, black's looking forward to things like rook d6 and rook d1. It looks as though that's on the cards, but white played a really powerful move after this bishop e5, which caused resignation at move 50. I wonder, have you seen this game, or what would you play here with white? Really powerful move, which spells disaster for black. So after this, what would you play? It's a really crushing move. Actually, the position is quite crushing. There's other moves as well. If white plays his a pawn resources carefully, what would you play here to finish the game? White to play. 20 seconds. Yeah, he plays a6 because actually there's an X-ray defense. If rook takes, then we just play rook takes e5. We've got that attack here. That'd be hopeless for black. And okay, so with a6, that's just a disaster, isn't it? If black tries to scurry back, we get this position, and it starts to get really horrible. White can do all sorts of things here. Yeah, the pawn is just too far advanced. Black's just going to crack up here. Okay, so yeah, a6, Topalov had enough and resigned. Okay, so one more game I just want to show you in round 8. So this is just today actually, today's game against Yang Yu. So round 8, hot off the press, Nakamura playing white, and he actually plays the c3 Sicilian himself. I don't remember him playing this recently. So d5, black plays d5, and we have this quite unusual move, which was recommended many years back at my chess club. Someone called Chris Jones, who's like 190 ECF, was recommending this move, knight a3. There was a club newsletter about it because white's got things like this, and also it supports bishop c4. You know, when knight f3 to avoid queen g2. It's a bit of a drunken knight move, knight a3. But it's in live book. This is really shocking. It's only 5 games, usually without foul. You know, about 8,000 games with D4, Knight F3, 316. But yeah, it's a surprise move, Knight A3. I think there's a little pattern emerging. Naku's doing some odd queenside movements in his openings, getting people totally out of book here. So in the previous hand we saw that A4. We've seen Knight A3 now. So black must be thinking, what to do about this? So if you can get the opponent improvising on their own resources early on, that can have a strong psychological effect. So they're probably out of their preparation now, seeing Knight A3. So we see Knight F6, Knight F3. So white is ready now with the G2 pawn shielded for Bishop C4. Knight C6. White doesn't bother with this side there. I don't think this is easily defended actually, just with Queen D8. This kind of tactic to go here, I think it's not a problem. Just kick the knight immediately. So a better use in this particular position would seem to be Bishop C4 of that drunken knight. Queen D8. Knight castles A6, and the knight can crawl back to the centre anyway. Knight C2, and it also supports D4 now, of course. Bishop G4, D4. So what's the matter with this? This seems perfectly okay. The engine has it about equal actually here. So maybe black is kind of equal. That's probably why it isn't played so much. White has used up 2 moves to get the knight to C2. E6, H3, bishop takes, queen takes, rook C8, rook D1, C takes. This bishop has to get out of the way, surely. If knight takes D4, knight E5, and actually, yeah, ouch. So the bishop drops back. Okay, he's going to get this D pawn back. Queen C7. Knight takes. I think actually white's getting something out of the opening now. I think black might be misplaying things slightly here, it seems. This position here may apparently, you know, okay, white seems to be getting some sort of advantage after knight takes D4 from a technical perspective, but let's carry on. Knight takes D4, C takes, because it seems to be the case that D5 is more aggressive than it should be. The queen is also a target for bishop F4 here. There's also bishop G5, which seems annoying. We see bishop D6, at least stopping bishop F4, but bishop G5 now. And white seems to have an unpleasant initiative all of a sudden. If, you know, we can't do that. If we do this, then this is not looking good. These forcing moves here. This position here is dangerous. So like this. Yeah, so something's gone wrong here. There seems to be an initiative in this position after bishop G5. Black acknowledges this. I know it's something to do with the queen on C7. Black acknowledges this and concedes casting rights with king E7. Yeah, this isn't looking good. Why should things have gone somehow wrong for black. He was clearly maybe improvising. And this doesn't look right in principle to have the king here. Rook E1, and it looks as though E6 is in meltdown here. H6, white takes, doubling the pawns, and rook E3. So if white can double, white will be threatening bishop takes E6 and smashing through black's king. Black calmly plays H5. We have rook A1. Really threatening bishop takes E6 now. Black defends this with queen D7, prepared to give up the queen. I don't think this works because there's a back row issue as well here. If we try and smash black up, this doesn't work actually. We get an immediate tempo threatening the mate here, mate in 2. So this position is only the queen against a big army. This is okay for black. So you don't want to do that. So Naka plays queen e4, and he's got another idea here. Either d5, well, d5 looks like an idea to try and force e5 to get this f5 square. So that's his plan, to dominate the light squares and to force the bishop to be blocked in by a pawn on e5. So d5 is on the cards. If black plays king f8, then again, you know, d5 is still on the cards. This is still kind of a little bit like the game. In fact, that is the game. sorry. D5. King f8 was played. King f8 was played. We have d5, e5. So black is now threatening the liberating f5. That's put a stop to with rook f3. So control over the f5 square. King g7. Now bishop c2. So this looks quite dangerous. This diagonal h4, stopping the use of g3. Rook f5, which gives now queen g4, shielded queen g4. Rook h6 to be able to answer with something like rook g6 if needed sometimes. Bishop d3, so the queen's not so tied down. Queen c7. Check. Now if rook g6, we can just take this pawn. This will be okay. This is not so dangerous, this position. Rook h5. So black played king f8. Now we have rook f3. Note this is a kind of attack here as well, rook f3. So white's keeping a lock and key on the light squares. Now this is a mistake. Queen c5 is actually a mistake. White is significantly increasing the advantage here after queen c5. Apparently better queen d8, queen b8. These are better moves, and it's not entirely clear how black is broken down. But with queen c5, there's a tactical solution that becomes available. Can you spot what Nakamura played? He there's a tactical problem here with queen c5. So white's play here, what would you play with white? Okay, there's this idea that rook could skewer the queen and rook here. So Nakamura played bishop takes a6. Trying for this. If it takes rook c3, and we're skewering queen and rook. But apparently black, probably that's best to play rook c7, ignore it. If here, queen a5. We have got the opposite coloured bishops here. But and d5, that's not so. No, that's not immediately winning for white, although it's looking pretty good. the engine choice here is spectacular in bishop h7. It threatens queen g8 check and rook c3. That's funny. Queen g8. If rook takes, we play this. Yeah. If here. This is crazy stuff. Okay. So yeah, that's the engine's choice. Bishop h7 in this position. It seems, but there's also bishop e4 is mentioned. So that has the threat of rook c3. This is just for theoretical interest. Rook c3. I think white gets a good position here, just dominating the c file, not even trying to win a pawn. So this domination of the light squares, the c file, is worth a lot here. The bishop's nicely centralized, controlling g6. White controls the c file. White's better here, better than actually. It's probably one of the best moves technically, just to play bishop e4. But anyway, this tactical, this more fireworky move, just taking on a6, was played. And black played rook g6. This might not have been the best response. So rook g6 instead of rook c7. Now, yeah, things are getting really tactical here. So what is white doing here? Well, Naka played actually queen f5. Still with this idea of rook c3. So if takes, we just play rook c3, right? It's going to be good for white. Apparently this is possible. Queen takes. This is crazy. If takes here, again that's possible there as well. So anyway, rook g6, queen f5. So still threatening this rook c3. King g7. Okay, so what's going on now? If rook c3 here, queen takes d5 hits g2. Black's avoided the check. It's not check. So he's actually got time to counterattack there. So that's no good now, rook c3. So bishop d3. Queen b4. Okay, looking at the rook here. Rook f e3. So white still has good control over the light squares. Rook c5. And this is another slight inaccuracy actually. Black apparently should maybe play rook d8. It's a very, very tactical position. But anyway, this allows this invasion with the queen. Queen d7. So looking at the bishop and looking at this rook. Rook c7. But now queen d8. Annoying. So again, is that rook moving? It does move to g5. But now we have this horrible move, rook e4, double attacking b4 and h4. And if h4, then we're on h8. And that queen's useful on h8. The queen tries to be as annoying as possible. Queen d2. And you know, this would be check if we take here. So there's no time for that. But bishop f1 maybe, so it stops being check. So rook takes h4 is potentially on the cards, as well as queen takes d6. Black takes on d5, but rook takes h4 now. So we're threatening a mate in 2 of queen h8. And Naka's found his way to the opponent's king here, really. After this rook takes h4, king tries to flee, king g6. Now maybe you'd be tempted with this check. He doesn't play this check. If check, well, this is still good actually. This would still be good. This wasn't played, but this is okay apparently. This position plays actually G4, which might even be much stronger. G4, just stopping the king using the F5 square, threatening a mate in 1. Queen G8 would be mate in 1. Black played F5, giving F6 square. Queen G8 check. And this is really embarrassing actually, because there's actually a kind of X-ray attack on the queen, and Black realizes this is a disaster now. He resigns, because if King F6, we have this check, and if Rook G6, we just take that, and we end up taking the queen. So it's a total disaster. This check here, and if the king, if Rook, not Rook G6, then we just take on G5. So yeah, that was the end of that one. Really tactical. Whew, what a game. But yeah, it started from this crazy move, which maybe is going to get some popularity, I don't know, but it's just an equal position technically, but it does get the opponent out of book. This position here, the opponent's out of book, having to improvise very early on, and it seems something disastrous happened in the opening for Black's king to be on E7. If we just quickly check this again, this position, the engine's choice is just like bishop E7, and maybe just get on with castling. We'll get out of this firing line, and Black should have been okay. Say with castling here, it should have been okay. Instead we get a completely different story emerging. So there's a simple bishop E7 here. We get a different story because we see Queen C7, and it seems Black's king wasn't that safe in this position. It's not safe. If Knight D7, yeah, this is annoying. This forcing sequence, which I mentioned earlier, is actually quite important. This position here, Black can't just castle safely because, you know, things like this. If Black can't castle here safely, then bishop takes E6 is going to be devastating. So something bad has really happened here in this opening. But yeah, Black defending E6. White's getting this grip on the light squares. And yeah, Black didn't help the position when this Queen C5 was played. This nasty tactical idea here, although he's like aiming for the D5 pawn, it's tempting. Maybe he just expected bishop E4. I mean, this is good as well. This is good to move as well. But yeah, things started to go badly wrong in this continuation. Yeah, things are very, I mean, it's a lot of calculations needed here. The rook going back, very precise calculation with Queen D7. So going into Black's position with Queen D7. White could have also just sat on the position here, positioning Bishop E4, like in Deep Blue against Kasparov, that, you know, classic Bishop E4, because Bishop's kind of locked in. It's protecting D5. White could be building up here slowly, but you know, Naka's going into the position and having to calculate a lot more, I think, with this. But it worked out. It worked out really well. Rook E4, double attack immediately. Yeah, I think Rook G5 probably didn't help either. Something like F5. This kind of tactical stuff, maybe a bit better. And there's crazy resources here like this, with that queen there. Okay, so this is just pure tactics. This is hard work to play this sort of stuff, but he got to the king in the end. it's a lot of hard work. There's, you know, some people seem to think chess is a collection of concepts. You get 5 or 6 concepts, you know how to play the game. You know, everyone can get the book called Simple Chess by Steen, Britain's first Grandmaster. You can get that for £4. You can download it to your iPhone. But in real games, you have to put in a lot of work to find accurate moves. It's not just about 7 different concepts. So when you look at Nakamura games, it's hard work which has been revealed in the details of particular positions. And it's very difficult to really get something that fundamental from a lot of these games. They're tactically rich. They are hard work. That's my opinion anyway. But yeah, I would recommend fundamental books as well. You know, Simple Chess by Steen if you're just starting chess. But these high level games are very interesting to look at. But you know, they're spending all day analysing detailed variations, and you end up, you know, having a look at games like this. They're mind blowing. Anyway, I hope you have a good week and improve your chess somehow. Comments or questions on YouTube. Okay, thanks very much.